So Elena, what got you into theater?
I would say the main thing that got me into theater probably was my mom. My mom always had like an affinity towards watching movie musicals as she was growing up, West Side Story and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And my sister was also a dancer in San Francisco Ballet. So she's my older sister. So when I was younger, we would always go see the Nutcracker every year. My mom would take us to go see shows that were coming to town. So I think Cats was maybe one of the first musicals that I saw. She put all of my siblings and I in dance class, like at the rec center, doing shows there. So really, I would say it was just the influence probably of my mom and her having that interest in it, and then that sort of encouraged or inspired me to keep doing it, bits and pieces throughout my whole life.
Oh, nice. Cats is an interesting one to start on.
I think, it was, but I think as a 6 or 7 year old, there's not really, that you're not necessarily watching or paying attention to the storyline,
Yeah.
but you're looking at these people move around and these really cool
Yeah,
costumes.
that's why it's so like, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a younger person, I think it is actually really cool to see because they all look very
Yeah.
feline. And to see that where you're watching people on stage not be people, but
Mhm.
really using your imagination to let go outside of the box. But I feel like that's one of the first ones that I remember going to see.
And just kind of like the spectacle of it. Just
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. And it was definitely downtown, like at either, the Orpheum or wherever. So you're in this huge, theater. Yeah, and it probably wasn't until I was older watching Cats that I was like, what's going on here? What's actually happening? Because I think I'd focused on what I was seeing,
Mhm.
so much that I wasn't necessarily paying attention to a story, or that there was a story, that it was just
Or
cats
what
dancing around.
story?
Yeah, there actually was a story.
Um, so you've done obviously both acting and dance in theatrical productions, and they do both kind of communicate similar things to advance the story. What would you say are some of the similarities and differences between acting and dance for the purpose of theater?
I mean, I would say I think one of the similarities is that, there is a certain, message or a certain emotion that you're trying to get across to your audience. In whether it's dance, um, yeah, whether it's dance, whether it's in, just theater, whether it's with music. I mean, you're trying to evoke some type of emotion out of someone. You're trying to share a message. So I think, in theater and in dance, both of them are trying to accomplish that objective. I mean, I think one of obviously the main differences is that with theater, you're using your voice, where with dance, you're using, your body to get that across. And not that theater and dance don't have, some links between the two. I mean, in theater, you're not just going to stand there and only speak, like you're using your body as well. In dance, you're not necessarily using your voice, but you may have music with lyrics to it. So you're using those influences in both. I think for theater, there's definitely a little bit more character work and research and objective work about what does your character want, and who are they, and where are they coming from, and why are they acting this certain way. And there's a different relationship with the people that you're with on stage, where I think with dance, it's a little more taxing on the body, because it's really only your body that you have to use to get that certain emotion or idea across to your audience. So I mean, I think they all kind of intertwine, but I'd say those are really kind of the main, two differences. I remember my sister, who was a dancer that I was talking about, she always, if she would see me on stage performing, she was always kind of in awe, because she's like, I could never get up there and actually speak. So, it's kind of interesting which medium people feel more comfortable with, in what way it's easier for them to be able to express themselves. I think just like with any art form, some use paint, some use, scrap metal, some sing. It just, I think, kind of depends.
So it's just kind of the difference in the way that you're trying to convey that emotion, even if the emotion is the same.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, using your words definitely has its benefits, but when you're using your body as well, you don't have to be focused on the words, and it is just kind of maybe a little bit more natural of what's coming through your body physically, where for some reason in my head with acting, there's a little bit more like mental work that has to go in there before it becomes muscle memory, where I think when you're dancing it's like it has to be that muscle memory kind of right off the bat, in doing the two. But I mean, other performers may think completely differently. Again, I think it just depends which realm you start at and where you feel that connection to the emotion more.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So what would you say is the most memorable show experience that you've had, and why was that one specifically memorable and stuck out to you?
I would say there's probably two that for me are the most memorable that I performed in. The first one was I played Sheila in a chorus line. And I think that was the most memorable because it was the first time. I mean, when you're performing in a chorus line, you don't have any other option but the fact that you're going to have to dance. Like you have to dance a lot, and there's just no getting around it. And for me, I think that one was so memorable because I was really proud of the fact that I even got cast in a musical where dance was kind of the main skill level in some way to have. Um, and prior to that, I had, really been working on my physical health and really getting in shape and working hard at it. And so for me, it was just nice to see that the fruits of that labor had kind of come to fruition, and being able to do that, to be cast in the show and to be able to perform in the show and not, fall over and, pass out. I was also able to help some of the other dancers who were cast in the show with the routines that we were learning. They were having trouble picking them up. And so that was really nice that I was able to kind of offer that help to them. So that was definitely one. And then the other I would say is I performed in Real Women Have Curves. And that one was just really memorable, I think mainly because of the cast and even the some of the crew that I was working with. It's an all female cast of 5 women. Our director was female, the costumer was female, and I just think we all grew really close together. It's a pretty small cast, and we're basically almost all of us on stage for the most part the whole time. And so you really had to work with the other actors there, and you had to have that sense of camaraderie and ensemble building to make it believable on stage. And I just think that worked for all of us, and it was really, really memorable. I miss all those ladies very much. So it was very nice.
It's just that kind of sense of team building that comes together.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think it just always helps if you can if you can have that sense of friendship, off stage as well. And it's not about being, the best of friends, but it's just knowing that you all have, similar experiences. That show definitely has to do with body image. And I think all of us were able to sort of connect on different levels that we engaged in that. And that was just kind of a tying, bond. And again, and we were all women of, kind of this range of maybe 15 years within each other. So a lot of that you could reminisce on things that had happened in your life and could then listen to people who had had different experiences as well. And just all of those stories kind of meshed really well together. And the director, Katia Rivera, was just awesome in helping us develop our characters, and really be very honest about the people that we were portraying. So that's always really, really helpful when you have that good direction.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so what was it like taking musical theater as a major in college, and how would you say it prepared you for your later career doing theater?
Well, for me, when I went to school, so I went to the University of Redlands, which is down in Southern California. And when I was there, their musical theater major was sort of just beginning. So they had a pretty strong opera program. They had like vocal pedagogy and things of that nature that I was not privy to. I sort of had done musical theater because I really liked it. And I didn't really have the training necessarily going into college that some of my peers did. Like I had never been in choir. I didn't know how to read music. I didn't really know any of those things. But I was able to take those classes and meet, professors who helped me with my own ignorance and helped me kind of work through them. And then luckily the program that I had at the University of Redlands, it was called Johnston College. And it was sort of like kind of an alternative learning program where you could sort of create your own major. So you could take classes at other universities that would supplement either what the school didn't have or what you were mainly interested in. So luckily I was able to do that with a couple teachers that I had met, some adjunct professors. And so I was able to take classes from them outside of my university and then bring that back into the training of what they did offer at my school. But I would say, I mean, doing any of those programs, it definitely teaches you, proper stage etiquette, what to do and what not to do as far as how you carry yourself on stage, how you carry yourself off stage, the ways that you treat your technical crew, the way that you treat your other performers, even if you don't necessarily have the same personalities. That I think especially that your job as an actor is to do that work. That is your job, is to show up and you do your job and you let the costumer do their job and you let the director do their job and the lighting do their job. Like there's definitely collaboration, but I think it is important to know what it is that your specific role is and to make sure to stay true to that. Because if you start kind of stepping on other people's toes, that's when things I think can get a little bit, messy. I think it also showed me that, in order to be a musical theater performer, it's a lot of work and just liking it is not enough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of daily training. There's a lot of, work that has to go on really outside of the classroom. And I think that can carry over to any, profession or career that you choose. It's not just about what's going on in the classroom. It's really about educating yourself outside of whatever educational institution you're in. And especially with theater, because there's not a linear career path. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, I feel like there are definitely milestones that you hit.
Yeah.
And I think in doing theater, those do not exist. And I think that was something that I probably learned more so after college.
Mhm.
But in sort of, I guess, preparing for that is really important because there's no
Yeah.
one trajectory.
Well, that's what we've heard from a lot of our previous interview guests
Yeah.
as well, is that like there's so many different paths that you can take with
Mhm.
the knowledge that you gain from doing either tech or performing.
Yeah, and a lot
Um,
of times you don't even know that they're happening. You just sort of fall into something and then you learn a little bit about um, something. And you might even go in one direction for a while and then either you decide that's not what you want to do and you try something else and you come back to it. Like there is a lot of back and forth.
yeah. So what made you decide to switch from performing, which we obviously just talked about, to doing more behind the scenes work in terms of the choreography and other things like that?
Well, I think like kind of what we were saying, I don't know if it was so much of a conscious decision as sort of something that kind of fell upon me and that I ended up doing. Part of it too is also, being an actor doesn't pay. It does not pay. You might get a little bit, but you are definitely not going to pay the bills and the rent and whatever just by being an actor for the most part. It's not to say that it's impossible or there are not exceptions to the rule, but usually doing tech, you you're able to be a little bit more financially secure, even though to say financially secure is a very gray area. But a lot of times what happens is the people behind the scenes sort of get the financial benefit because the people on stage get the recognition of being on stage. So I mean, it's a little bit of a trade-off. Because at one point in time, I was working as a waitress. I was, performing myself. I just started getting into teaching, and you end up having a lot of these, you have a lot of jobs. There's definitely a hustle that comes along with being an artist. And I think for me, part of it was that I wanted to get paid for doing something that was artistic and creative, and doing more technical work, being a choreographer, being a teaching artist, all of those things had more of a financial benefit than anything else. And for me, my sister had passed away in 2016. And after that, I was like, I kind of just want to take a break from being on stage. And when I sort of came back into things, I was like, let me just try one thing at a time, because it can be really mentally exhausting to be juggling all of these different balls. And I think it's important to have that kind of, stability in, okay, what am I going to do, and where's my focus going to lie? Um, so that might answer your question. So I don't really know actually what kind of happened. It was sort of a culmination, I think, of many things.
Yeah. So being able to like kind of juggle the things that you wanted to do with the financial stability that came with not with doing something in the same realm but different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then still trying to do, theater along with that.
Mhm.
So it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle for sure.
Yeah. So we obviously have worked together at Linda Boga's Musical Productions, a children's theater company that for everyone in the club has come up quite a bit. So what would you say like made you kind of start to getting into children's theater and get involved in the running of that theater company?
So for me, what was, I would say, my first catalyst in doing it was I was taking a dance class at a dance studio called Rhythm and Motion, that's now turned into ODC in the city. And one of my teachers, I was her like dance assistant in class, and she offered me the opportunity to teach at an after school program teaching hip hop to kindergartners. And I had absolutely no clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to do it, no clue. But she had recommended me and asked if I was interested. And I kind of was like, okay, sure. So I started doing that. And then that sort of led to a couple different jobs through that dance, where I was taking dance. And then another girl that I knew that I was in a show with, I had done Chicago at City Lights down in San Jose. And she had previously worked for Linda, the company that I work for now. And because that company is based in San Francisco, the girl that I was in the show with asked if I would be interested in being the assistant choreographer, which is what her role was previously. So she basically was like, hey, do you want my job? And I was like, okay. So I went on an interview, and again, not really sure or secure in what I was doing, but just kind of winged it for a while. Luckily, I was able to learn from the woman who was the choreographer there. So picked up some tricks there. I got to know the kids. And that was kind of how that relationship started. So it was just kind of luck of the draw and a very random referral. And I couldn't tell you why any of these people asked me to do what they did, but they somehow did. And I guess it's worked out, because I've been doing it probably for about 15 years on and off at various locations.
Yeah.
So
Well, and obviously children's theater is a little bit different than doing stuff with adults. Like I'm sure that's come with challenges as well.
yeah, absolutely. And choreographing for teens and adults is definitely something that I have wanted to look into. Again, the world is in a very strange place. So to just prioritize what your goals are sometimes is a little tricky at the moment. And creating, those new relationships, takes work, and sometimes face-to-face work with other people, and just kind of the way theater is at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely working with, more adult casts is something I'd like to try, because that, the choreography and the mentality, the headspace to be in that is completely different. But for me, children's theater has definitely been where any of my any of my resume has all of that has fallen in children's theater for sure.
Mm. So we talked about previously, being able to do something that you love and still get paid for it. What is your favorite thing about performing and your favorite thing about choreography? If they're the same thing, great. If they're not,
No, I think they're different. I mean, I would say the thing that I really love about performing is performing. It's being on stage. It's, you know, feeling the energy from everybody that's in the room. It's the focal point that people have on you. It's knowing that you've entertained them, that you've shared a message with them, that you've been able to convey whatever emotion you were trying to convey to them. I think and I don't know, this may or may not be true for all actors because everyone's different, but for me, there's a sense of validation that I get and confidence that I get from being on stage. I think actors sometimes can tend to be somewhat insecure. And so for me to know that I can be on stage and entertain and make people have a good time, that makes me feel really good.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit of a selfish objective, but that's kind of what I really like about performing is knowing that I've done a good job and that I've been able to entertain people in some way or
Yeah.
another. For me, I would say for choreography, the thing that I like the most, and I don't know, maybe it is kind of the same, but I really like knowing that something that I've tried to teach people, and especially for me because they're children and it can be a little bit trickier, but is knowing that I've been able to teach them something that they have been able to get. That there's an idea that I had in my head that I was able to teach, kids, that now they're able to take the idea that I had in my head and that I was trying to verbally and physically explain, and that they've actually been able to perform that
Mm.
on stage. There's definitely a sense of gratification that I get knowing that, again, maybe I'm not as bad at this as I thought. So again, maybe it is that like validation or that insecurity.
Mm.
And it's just really exciting. Like there've been a few times where I've taught kids something and maybe we're just in rehearsal and they just like nail it. And I am jumping up and down because I'm so excited because they got it. And I think, if that even comes full circle, like that's exciting as a performer when you've been taught something and you just get it. It's just a very clean line because, it can be really hard to have an idea in your head and you're not able to verbalize it or it's not working. And then you have to trash it and start all over again, but you only have so much time because, rehearsal only lasts. And there can be a lot of pressure on that because you're the one that's in charge of how that's going to look. So for me, there's definitely something knowing that like all of those pieces have come together and that the kids get it and that they're having fun and that it's worked.
Mhm. It's certainly a similar thing with tech. I mean,
Mhm.
when you actually like finish the final show and you realize that like all the stuff that you've built, obviously you're gonna take it down in a couple days. But like
Right.
the last couple days, it's there, but it's not doing anything. It's like it's nice to just oh, I did a good job and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's certainly that like good feeling when you.
Yeah, I'm sure like you push the button and all the lights come up and then you add the costumes and then,
Mhm.
oh, that works. Oh, cool. It doesn't clash with, what the paint designer did. I mean, all of those things have to like
Yeah.
come into play. Good. Glad I'm not the only one. I was like, oh my gosh, I sound like, oh, I'm so insecure.
Uh, So this has come up a little bit in the past and the couple minutes that we've been in this interview, but you've had very little formal dance and choreography training,
Mhm.
and yet you've still managed to have a successful career doing choreography. What would you say has been some of the challenges that you faced from not having that training but still working in choreography?
Well, I think kind of like what we were talking about, it definitely brings up a lot of feelings of, self-doubt and insecurity that, should I even be here? Especially I think at those moments when things they're not working. Like you had a really bad rehearsal or I've been listening to a song like over and over again and I just can't, I'm feeling uninspired or like nothing's,
Mhm.
coming. Um, it can really, play a mind trick on you that like, should I even be doing this? Why am I even doing this? Like, I can't do this because I don't have this formal training, because I don't really know, how to do these things. I mean, I'd say that would be one of like the main challenges. I think sometimes even with that, it means that sometimes I have to do a little bit more research. Like I have to look more into different styles of dance that other people have done. I'm watching, other productions and performances to be inspired, not to
Mhm.
copy, but to be inspired. I mean, everyone's, kind
Yeah.
of picking bits and pieces from everybody that they watch. Um, but yeah, sometimes, or if things don't necessarily come naturally to me about maybe certain techniques or certain ways to almost like be creative, almost like mindlessly, that because certain things are so ingrained, that because you have this certain muscle memory of how your body moves and a really strong knowledge of your own body and how it moves, and being able to bring that to others, sometimes that can be a challenge. But then on the flip side, I can only do what I do.
Yeah.
Even if I did have, more technical training, my body and my creativity is, only natural to me. It's going to be different from you, even if we had, the same training. So you just
Yeah.
kind of have to, yeah, kind of work through that a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
So,
So what would you say is the most important skill that you have to have while working in the theater industry?
I would probably say you have to be able to collaborate. You just have to collaborate, working with others, being in the ensemble. And I think that has to do with whether you are performing on stage or off stage,
Mm.
whether you're part of the tech or not. I think you have to be able to collaborate, because an idea that I have in my head, say as a choreographer, well, it might be a great idea, but if then I talk to the tech crew and they're like, well, that's not what the set is going to look like, or no,
Mm.
we can't have someone flying across the stage because we don't have a rig, or I want people to twirl their skirts, well, they're going to be wearing pants. Like all of this has to work together. I can't just
Mm.
say, oh, well, this is what I'm going to do, because that's not how it works. And the same thing, even if I'm an actor, like I have to be able to work with my costumer and my director and the sound guy. I can't be screaming into my mic all the time, or I need to let him know that at this point I'm going to be screaming so he or she can turn the levels down. Like everybody has to work together, or it just it just won't work
Yeah.
for theater.
That's certainly a thing that happens in all the departments of tech as well. We've been going over the different departments and teaching you guys all about that. And we know that, all the departments kind of have to mesh together pretty well in order to avoid there being any weird things that wind up happening. If the costumes look like from a different time period than the set is, it doesn't work at all. So yeah, definitely collaboration is super important. I agree.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think too, sometimes, tech, I think sometimes maybe can get a bad rap, because I think that a lot of times the focus sometimes can be about the people on stage. And, the only reason that they look good is because of the work that tech is doing. And I think that, that is really an important lesson for actors to know, to be aware of, that hey man, to turn your light off or your mic off. Not that anyone, of course, would ever do that. But I'm just saying, you have to, you do have to work together, and I as an actor need to be respectful of, the costumes that I'm wearing and the props that have been built for me or purchased for me. Um, and all of those things, I think, end up coming full circle if you can do that respectfully to
Yeah.
everyone that's on the project.
Yeah. So you told me about the three aspects of choreography. You told me about this prior, being the theme, the song, and the story.
Mhm.
So how are you balancing these aspects while choreographing a number?
So I think what I sort of meant by those three elements is sort of like which. I think it depends if you are choreographing, like just a dance ensemble, project, right? Where it's only dancing, or if you're doing a musical. So I think it depends what kind of project you're working on. But I think what I meant by saying the theme, the song, and the story is really kind of which part is inspiring you to do the work. Where's your inspiration coming from? You know, is it the theme? Is there a certain, you know, message that this entire project is trying to get across? And how does that inform the way that you want your dancers to move? Um, you know, are there certain, you know, color schemes that are being thrown throughout? And what do those mean? And how can you incorporate into your, how can you incorporate them into your dances? So I also think sometimes theme might have a little bit to do with like the dramaturgy that you need to do. Like, what time period are we in? How did people
Yeah.
move? What did they wear? Would they have a pointed foot or would they have a flexed foot? Would they be partner dancing or would they not? Like, what do all of those things? How do they inform what it is that you see is going to be happening on stage? So I think that's what I mean by theme. And by song, I think it's paying attention to the lyrics. Like, what are the words telling you? Because sometimes I think you don't have to work necessarily as hard as you think, because if you just listen to what's going on, that actually might inspire you about how the characters are feeling, what they're trying to get across to the audience. What is the music saying? Is there a certain accent? Is there a certain downbeat? Is there a certain part that the music just cuts off? And
Yeah.
how are you respectful of the song in all of its elements that again can inform the way that you're going to choreograph, the way that you want your dancers to dance, and what points you want them to really to hit a little bit harder. And I mean, as far as the story goes, I think sometimes that's yeah, what story are you trying to tell? How do the characters relate to one another? You know, sometimes I think too it's important to know, you know, if there's a really important part of the story that needs to be told in the middle of your dance, then you need to make sure that your dancers have time to breathe so that they can speak the words that they're supposed to now speak or that they're supposed to sing. You know, if I have someone doing a, you know, a backflip into a triple pirouette and then they're supposed to, you know, belt out this final note of the song, like they're not going to be able to get that story across. So it's being respectful of, you know, what story are we trying to tell here, and how does the dance influence that? You know, and sometimes I think if you're starting just from scratch and you want to like choreograph something, I think that's a good place to start. Do you want to start off with a certain theme? You know, sort of a more general idea? Do you want to start off with a certain song, or are you trying to tell a certain story? So I think sometimes when you're like, I just want to choreograph something, well, how do you even begin? And I think sometimes taking one of those three aspects is a good way to at least, you know, get started.
Wow.
If that makes any sense. I'm
It
not
does.
sure if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
All the like the meshing of everything together. And that's kind of been a through line that you've been talking about a lot in terms of the collaboration and meshing everything together so it fits all together into one
Mhm.
production is super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is my last question from me before we pass it over to the audience to see if they have any. But do you have any tips for us students who are trying to get into theater professionally?
Well, I would say definitely, as I've mentioned multiple times, is definitely learn how to be a team player. You want to make sure you have good communication skills, that you're able to effectively communicate what it is that you want and what it is that you need. Um, I think trying out a little bit of everything. I think it's important for actors to know how tech works so that they can appreciate the work that's being done um, behind the scenes. I think it's important for tech to take acting classes so that they understand the needs of actors. Um, I think it's important to kind of dip your toe into a lot of those different classes and realms, even if it's something that you're like, there's no way I'm going to want to do that. I'm not very tech savvy, so sound is probably going to be something that's really difficult for me, but it's important for me to know how it works So again, I can effectively communicate that to my tech designer when they're trying to figure those things out. Because I think all of the different aspects, we're talking about collaboration, so they all lend something when you know a little bit about it, and it's appreciated because then you can communicate a little bit clearer, because sometimes even just the terminology that you're talking about is something that the other person understands. I also think another tip is just try something. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is that you're going to fail. In that, I mean that like it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think if you come at it also with a place of, gratitude for having the opportunity, a sense of honesty, sometimes about about our own um, ignorance about certain things.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that you'll do from that failure though is learning from it, or saying, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do that again. Or, oh, that was really kind of interesting, because I think even when you try them, that one certain thing might not be what your niche is, but you might meet someone else who's like, hey, I know you worked on this thing. Do you
Mm.
want to try this with me? And you can say, oh, sure. And sometimes just one thing really leads to another, which, I feel like earlier I was saying that I don't really know how I sort of like fell into this. It kind of just happened. Like I was in a musical that someone had asked me, hey, do you want to choreograph for this children's, show? Okay. I was taking a dance class and my teacher asked me to do, this thing. I've helped with costumes and learned a little bit about that from being backstage with kids. And so I think it's just being really open to any experience, and definitely keeping in contact with people, because like me, and it sounds like some of the other people that you've had here
Mm.
really talk about how there is this, you have to have multiple, you have to be juggling multiple balls in the air at one time. And so
Yeah.
I think being able to have different skills in different areas will help you stay working, and will help keep your mind fresh of things that are going on, because it's absolutely possible to be, I am a stage manager. I'm a professional stage manager and that's what I do. But I think it's also possible to say, well, I stage manage for this company, but then I also do, I work in the costume room at this company. And then, oh, I also work for a publishing company. I mean, that might inform
Yeah.
you about different literature that's out there. And then, so I think it's really just try out everything that you can. I would say definitely be aware of how much or how little you can handle, because sometimes I think it's easy to take on everything and then you're busy all the time, but you kind of are getting nothing done. If
Yeah.
that makes sense, because I would say this profession is definitely a hustle. You're
Mm.
always kind of hustling. People that have other jobs get a job and they get hired and then they work there for 30 years and they retire and then that's it. And I think in this profession, it just it's not like that. You are usually constantly looking for work or your next gig every 2 to 3 months, because that's usually about how long, at least in my experience, how long it takes to put up a show, right? You rehearse for 2 to 3 months, you do the show, and okay, now you're out of a job. Whether you're the actor, the costumer, the stage manager. So, it does take a lot. And sometimes that's why it is helpful to have a few different things going on, because you don't get, sort of pigeonholed into only saying, well, oh, I can only do stage manager stuff. I can only choreograph. And if I don't have a job that I'm choreographing, then I don't have a job at all.
So being able to kind of do all those different things.
A little bit, or at least to have some knowledge, or at least an ability to try them out,
Yeah.
so that, yeah, it is definitely a tough career. I'd say really the main thing is just get ready to hustle, because
Okay.
it's a hustle, man, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Elena.
Yeah, for
Now
sure, my pleasure.
the audience, if I know there are less of you than in some of the others due to our schedule change, but If any of you have any questions for Elena, please just put it into the chat relatively soon, and I'll pass it over to Bianca if she wants to read out any that she sees.
There aren't any questions in the chat yet, but also if you just have a question, you can also just unmute yourself and just say it directly or put it in the chat or whatever you're more comfortable with.
All right. I am seeing no questions at the moment.
I've got a question. So
Cool.
yeah, so how, when you move from going to working on the children's theater and taking on kind of a bigger role in a show, did you do any extra training or learn anything else to prepare you for that role, or did you just survive on your own skills that you've made up since then?
I think, to be very honest, well, it's been a little bit of both. There definitely has been, my main job currently is as a teaching artist. So I'll go to different schools and then I'm teaching kids about musical theater in their own schools, or at different theater companies. And that has definitely taken research and training on my own part. Reading different books about creative movement, reading other people's curriculums and ways that they organize their class, and then adapting them to what I excel at, or taking different classes. I'm currently taking a class in voiceover, because for me at the moment, being on stage, well, for probably everyone, like being on stage isn't necessarily something that we can do right now. So, okay, well, what can I do? I can use my voice, but I don't know how to do that. So I need to take classes in that. I've been taking voice lessons from the same woman for probably 15 years, if not longer. But then there is a part that it's like, there's only so much that training can do. And sometimes you do have to just rely back on, kind of like what I was saying before, is that, this is what I do and this is how my body moves, and I can't, do the splits. So what can I do with just whatever kind of raw, talent that I have on my own? So I think it is a mix of both. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah.
So it's always constantly learning and relying on your own.
Yeah, it is kind of both. But I mean, I think there's definitely always something to learn. There's always a different way to do something. Because I also think in this profession, there's not one way. There isn't. There's basics that go into it, but there's still not one way. There might be a sort of basic, there are basic dance steps that I know, but it doesn't mean that I can only put them together in a basic way. Or this might be a standard way to, light the stage, right? But it's not the only way. So I think being open to what those new ideas are, and I do think, especially with the way that technology is working, that there are going to become even, more ways than probably I could even think of. I think especially for more technical parts of theater, like sound and lighting, that those will all become, much more technical. So to stay up on your skills, because there's always going to be someone else, coming behind you, and that's fine. But, you do want to stay relevant to what's going on too. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Elena, for all of the wisdom you've imparted.